I'm Kate.
I'm Elle.
And we are Down to Fae. This week, we're continuing our Throne of Glass deep dive with The Assassin in the Desert, which is my personal favorite of the Assassin's Blade stories. And when I was outlining this, it got kind of long. I fucked us by posting the schedule. So now we have to keep to the schedule. So we're doing it in 2 parts, but releasing on the same day. So if you're listening to this one, the other part is already available.
Yes. So again, this is part 1.
Yes, that is a better way to put it. This is part 1. Part 2 is already up.
Of The Assassin in the Desert, and part 2 is directly after this. It's a lot for one sitting to post for you guys.
It is a lot. There's a lot of characters we meet, characters that we will see later on in the series. But then I also have to give a warning about Akatar and Crescent City a little bit. We're going to talk about that a little bit because more than the other Assassin's Blade stories, there's some connections, especially like with the witches, and we'll get to it. The archway,
well, and
there's a lot.
There's a lot to unpack that happens to her in a short period of time and kind of makes her more the Selena that we know of in Throne of Glass.
Oh, yeah.
It has like personality development. So next week we will stay on the same schedule and do The Assassin in the Underworld.
And you have this week's book rec, and it is one that I've seen all over Book Talk, and I'm starting to question whether or not that's a good thing based on something that you told me about this.
You guys get ready. I mean, generally, the recommendations that are on Book Talk that I have made, I have enjoyed reading them, and some of them have been very spicy. This is a little bit more YA. I think it's for like 13 and above. So there are sexy situations. It's just not as much graphic detail as we would appreciate.
Like cutaway?
No, but it's like not like, they're having sex, but it's like the way the flowery language is not like he's thrusting into her. It's like some other way of describing it. And you're like, yeah, okay.
Like, they're making love.
Basically. So this series, especially because it's October and witches, it's been all over Book Talk, is The Heartless Hunter by Kristen, I think it's Ciccarelli.
It's a very pretty cover of that book.
Yes, it's the crimson moth on the front cover.
Okay.
So this series is set in a world where witches exist and humans do know about them. They also seem to have electricity, but they don't really reference any other present day technology. I'm not sure if other supernaturals exist in this world because it's mostly just focused on the witches. The series starts 2 years after a revolution in this kingdom. This is just an island kingdom, so it's not everywhere.
Okay.
This kingdom had been ruled by 3 witch sisters. The wealthy, privileged class had also been witches, so they were overthrown by the humans 2 years ago.
Okay.
It's interesting because in this world, the magic, you have to have blood in order to cast spells. So fresh blood is going to be the strongest. And in the past, when there was nothing to fear, witches would cut themselves in order to have fresh blood. And then anytime you make a cut in order to do a spell, a silver scar is left behind. So witches would often cut themselves in patterns, kind of like tattoos, and they'd have these pretty silver patterns and lattice work all over their arms and legs. But these scars made them very
identifiable.
Yes.
Okay. That's really interesting. I haven't heard anything like that.
So as soon as there's a rebellion, like a revolution, a rebellion, whatever you might want to call it, the witches are effed because you can't really hide these. Like, it's not that hard to go looking for these silver scars because nobody casts just one spell. And it's actually really sad when they start coming for the witches. It's not burning at the stake. They call it purging. They literally take these witches and hoist them up by the ankles and slit their throats so that they bleed out. They're purging the blood.
Animals.
It's wild. And I'm not sure of the motivation for all of the different revolutionaries, but most of them have in common that they hate witches and they experienced harm from witches. And then therefore believe that all witches are bad, which is stupid. So obviously it's not true. Blood that is used in spells without consent leads to darker magic, and that corrupts. So there are witches that have taken blood without consent, and then they're obsessed with doing more spells, and they are clearly turning evil. So of course, people are going to be hurt by them. Those types of spells were outlawed by the witch queens hundreds of years ago. Obviously, they didn't stop it from happening. So our female main character, Rune, is a wealthy heiress who was actually raised by a witch. And she actually turned in her grandmother as a witch and was therefore able to keep her fortune.
Okay.
I know.
And we like her.
So you're like, don't love this.
Yeah.
It turns out she and her grandmother were preparing to run. And I guess somebody found out and prepared a trap for them. And then they were warned that there was a trap coming, and her grandmother did not want to see her die. And she was like, you have to turn me in so that you can live.
Okay.
So it's actually really sweet and really sad because she turned her grandmother in, and then she had to show no emotion as they killed her grandmother.
So all the other witches probably hate her.
Yes, those that remain are definitely like side-eyeing her. And it was also terrible timing because within a few months of her grandmother dying, she had her first period, and oops, you're a witch too. So
so she didn't even know. You're not automatically a witch if you're born
you
to
come
a
into your
witch.
powers with your first. So since it's all revolving around blood, your first bleeding, and it's weird because the very first one, if you're a witch, is black blood.
Oh God,
I know, it's like graphic and intense. It's very distinct. So in the last 2 years that all this has happened, Rune has secretly been using her wealth and working with 2 of her best friends to save witches from the purging. And she's been hiding as the Crimson Moth, which is why the front cover is a moth.
Okay. Is that like her vigilante?
Well, actually,
ego?
whenever she casts a spell, like a little bitty, it's like a residue is left behind after a spell, and it has like a little red moth. So, like, I guess I don't think she got to choose it. It just
like a little
is
calling card,
like
or
her.
like,
it's her unique signature.
Patronus.
So, like, because nobody knows she's a witch, you know, they don't know where it's coming from, and because she's an heiress and has all this money, she's able to use like her merchant ships to get people off the island. The part that I told Kate that's really gross is in order to not have scars but still have blood to do magic, she's using period blood. And it's
I would be able to perform so much magic
like the engine.
these days.
The ingenuity is very smart. It is not fresh blood. I know this is so gross. So like she can do some magic, but it's not really strong magic.
Okay.
And she's using it for the sake of saving other witches. She's not out there just like doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It's so gross.
I mean, I guess they made it work.
I mean, it's gross because like she's also using her best friend's blood.
They're like collecting.
So that like
do
she
they
can
just
do
like collect it and then use it?
Yep. I love my friends. I'm not sure I'm ready to do it for myself, let alone them. So that's kind of gross. But again, they are using it to save other witches. So I have to just like overlook that. Whenever they start talking about like she's doing stuff with the blood, I'm like, huh, huh. Because also, even if like you willingly give a witch blood to use, you will then have a silver scar. Somehow, any cut that's made, if the blood's going to be used for magic, it leaves a scar. So like, obviously her friend doesn't want to like have the witch hunters come after her either. Cause like once this revolution happened, like families turning on families, like the 2 witches that Rune saved most recently were twins, 13 years old, that had just had their period, and they like freaked out and hid their bed sheets, but like the house staff found them and turned them in. So like they'd never cast any magic.
Can witches be born to anyone then? Or is it
probably
like families or lines?
It's not every generation. So like Rune's mother wasn't a witch. And it's a little bit unclear, but I don't think she's actually a blood relative of her grandmother who raised her.
Because she's not like other girls.
Yeah.
She's special.
Yeah. So like that's kind of referenced as well.
Let me guess. She falls in love with a witch hunter? Does she?
Well, I know you'll never guess. But so like when the story begins, Rune is actually racing to save another witch, and she gets there just after the soldiers. So then she has to go back to being an heiress and like putting on her like silly facade as if she's vapid and has no other concerns. And then they, I guess, have caught on to her rescuing witches. So they've started moving the witches from where they're hiding them. And to find out where they're hiding them, she's going to have to start courting the #1 witch hunter because he's in charge of all these things. He's also one of her best friend's older brother. So
and he's sexy?
Oh, he's so sexy. His name is Gideon, and he is...
I don't love that. I've never met a sexy Gideon. I had an intern named Gideon one time.
I was like, I've never met anybody named Gideon. So like, okay. Well, Gideon is like, he doesn't suffer fools, basically. So he thinks that the main character is a super silly heiress. He's like, God, you're annoying. Who cares about your frilly dress and your flowers?
Yeah.
And he didn't come from money. And all the money she has represents all the oppression they had 2 years ago. So he just hates everything about her. But the last 2 witches that escaped, there was magic found on one of her merchant ships. So he's like, could she Actually, no, she couldn't be the moth. She's too stupid.
Yeah.
But he like starts kind of dating her back in an effort to get more information about who had access to her
So it's
ships.
like forced proximity, enemies to
It is
lovers.
truly enemies to lovers. And
And we
then,
love because a lot of times enemies to lovers is more strangers to lovers in these
well,
series, but
there's several betrayals. So like it kept me, it's not as spicy as I would have loved, but it kept me on the edge of my seat because there's several betrayals
Mhm.
that one of them I kind of saw coming.
Was it one of the
And
witches? Don't tell me.
I don't know. I can't tell you.
Okay.
But there's several betrayals, and this girl is out here trying to do all this, and she's got two of her best friends, but she's also kind of alone
Mhm.
because um there's a movement that's starting to grow where, like, when they had this big revolution, the guy that was leading it was like, nobody's going to go hungry. There's a wealth disparity. We're going to fix all these things. And guess what? He didn't.
Yeah.
So now people are like, great. Why do
Now
we not
what?
just have the witches again? Because at least we had food then.
Mhm.
So, combination of problems. There is actually a witch that's kind of starting to lead this underground movement, and she's
Mhm.
actually evil.
Ew.
So, our main character is kind of trapped between a rock and a hard place. Like, I can't go with the witch hunters because they're not going to get it. So, although I'm a witch, I'm not with her either because she's evil. So
Yeah.
it's a lot. Everything's very fast paced. The
It
second
sounds interesting, and the world isn't that hard to
No,
understand.
and the second book is not out yet, which is annoying
We
because it
hate that.
obviously leaves on a cliffhanger, and you're like,
Mhm.
so I recommend reading it. It took me a day.
Okay.
It's not a super long book. I read it. I also, when I read, I can't stop if I really like it.
Yeah,
So like,
you are one of those readers where you're like, "Yeah, I was up till 3 AM reading."
yep, have those kind of regrets, but yeah, it's worth reading.
And what was it
Heartless
again?
Hunter
Heartless Hunter.
by Kristen Ciccarelli.
Okay, and then I just posted a reel I put together of a lot of our book recs, and I know it's not the best list because we weren't doing video for House of Earth and Blood and Sky and
Yeah,
Breath.
it's not all of our
It's not
recs.
all of them, which we're gonna bring back some of the classics, like we were talking about the Fever series
Yeah,
by Karen Moaning that we talk about that all
we
the
reference
time.
it all the time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to talk about it again because it's so good.
So that's on Instagram and TikTok if you want to I put it in the caption, the list of books, and then you can also screenshot. I put the book covers in there. And then I'm also working on something that has all of those books that we did for the first two books. Just if you want to and I'm putting it in show notes too. We don't do the best job of at the beginning and end saying the names of the books and everything, but if you have a book rec that you want to send us, our DMs are always open on
Always.
TikTok and Instagram at DTFA Podcast. And there is a little more, like I was saying, a little more Akatar and Crescent City talk in this episode. So I'm going to give a general spoiler warning. It's very light spoilers. Like, I don't think it's spoilers that are going to ruin your experience reading Crescent City or something. But we will talk about some mass verse connections and theories, at least more than the first two stories in Assassin's Blade. And just a quick setup before we get into the assassin in the desert. Rivals turned frenemies turned maybe something more. Selena and Sam pissed off their problematic murder daddy and king of the assassins, Arabin Hamel, by freeing 200 slaves and ruining his deal with the pirate lord.
On her way to the Red Desert, where Arabin is sending Selena as punishment, the 16-year-old assassin stopped in Inish and had a side quest with healer Irene Towers.
Her perhaps fated run-in with Irene convinced Selena to continue the journey from Rifthold to the Red Desert, where she will train with the Mute Master and the Silent Assassins.
We meet up with her and her nomad guide on the set of Dune.
It makes me think of the Dune music, like, oh.
Well, she talks about the singing sands, and I was like, oh God, what happens if it's the wrong harmony?
I know that's a little silly. That's a little fairy tale
That's
sounding.
also kind of impossible, but
Oh, like
know.
the rest of this is possible. The magic with the period blood is possible.
Anything is possible if you believe. Well, her guide is taking her to.
I put that for you to pronounce.
I know I will say it wrong because I'm going to say it with how it looks, which looks like Sessiz Sukast.
Sounds right. I'm assuming that was supposed to be Silent Assassins in Turkish. Reddit says it's not quite right, but it's the Silent Assassins.
Well, I mean, she's probably creating her own language from it and adapting it. Selena's traveling through the singing sands where each grain hums, whines, and moans.
The moaning, you were walking on sand. Oh.
But also I'm like, are they clumps of one sound? Because what if I'm not in charge of whatever a breeze blew around. That's wild. So they do have to be careful where they step to keep the sand ringing in harmony, or the sands will dissolve into quicksand. That's crazy.
I'm always been really scared of quicksand because it just seemed like it would be a really big issue as an adult. Like every cartoon you watched and movie and show when you were
People
a
got stuck
kid,
all the time.
everyone you were like, okay, I need to know how to get out of quicksand.
Anything could
It
happen.
hasn't come up yet.
And despite being paid, the guide stops 2 miles from the fortress.
And Selena's like, 2 miles, how long could that take? And it's like that SpongeBob voice, 5 hours later. She walks into the red sandstone fortress and passes open air training rooms with people from all kingdoms and of all ages, sparring, exercising, and meditating.
She's escorted to a giant chamber where figures watch from the shadows of the columns. Atop the dais is the mute master himself. Is it dais or dais?
Dais.
Okay. My whole life it's been days in my head, but what's new?
That's
I'm always wrong.
Books that are one of those words you never have to say out loud.
Well, I was just like days, and then I was like, I'm pretty sure the Audible girl said dais. Cool. Atop the dais is the mute master himself, dressed in white robes.
The white robes and the meditating and everything, I would be like, is this a fucking cult? Did I just join a cult? Like, it's very, you don't know what to think at first because the way that Arabin set it up to Selena was like, I don't even know if he's going to take you. Like, they're tougher than I am.
Yeah, he made it seem very much like a cult, like it's hard to get in, be
Right.
accepted. She'd expected him to be ancient, but he seems to be around 50. He's tan, but it's hard to tell if it's from the sun or if he's always been that tan. She guesses he's from Eelway, but his almond-shaped eyes suggest the southern continent.
And I do love the aesthetic of there's green and blue glass, mosaic tiles, and there's flowing water. So it sounds very pretty inside.
It's very Oasis.
It is, but you're in the desert with no air conditioning, and they're literally running across the sand. That's a fucking nightmare.
I would literally die. At least the mute master has 2 people fanning him with palm leaves.
Selena looks like shit after 2 weeks of walking through the desert with no water to bathe in, but she approaches the mute master, and obviously she has to be the one to talk. He literally has mute in his name, but we find out later on that it's just a choice. Now, I don't think it's a spoiler because it's in the same episode.
I respect it.
But, like, he could have been talking. He just chose not to. He's a silly little character.
Is he?
Yeah, just like when he's slithering around like a snake, I'm like, so for real right now.
When we get to that section, I have no idea what the fuck that looks like. We'll have to discuss.
In my head, it's very cartoonish. He is very cartoonish.
I have follow-up questions. After beating the shit out of her, Arabin instructed her on exactly what to say. No masks, no disguises, no fake names.
Okay, Selena.
Yeah, I was like, why is that even mentioned? She's going to say Selena. She has 1 month to win the mute master's respect. If she doesn't return to Rifthold with his letter of approval, a letter about Selena Sardathian, she needs to find a new murder daddy.
She does amend one thing from Arabin's script, calling him the king of the northern assassins. You know he would hate that. Instead of the king of all of the assassins, which I mean is a respectful thing to do.
Yeah.
She asked the mute master to train her, even if on the inside, I mean, this is Selena, even 16-year-old Selena. She's like, me needing training? Like, I'm Otterland's assassin, but whatever. I'm here because I have to be. Like, she doesn't go into it.
Rolf half-handed her ass to her when they were in Pirates Bay. She's like, I don't need training. And I'm like, don't you? Jeez.
Can you even slither around like a snake, Selena? I don't think so.
What is that Vine? He's like, I'm a snake.
Classic Vine. Vine was so good.
It's been coming up again recently, and as soon as I was reading that, I was like, I'm a snake. Anyway, okay. He tilts her head up and takes in her still healing face, courtesy of Arabin, and his eyes narrow. It's a vulnerable position. He could easily snap her neck, but also she's kind of laid bare, like there's no mask, realish name, and she's covered in bruises.
And she's vulnerable internally too. She's wondering what happened to Sam, who she didn't see in the 3 days following her beating from Arabin.
The master gives her a smile, but before she can smile back, he snaps his fingers and she's charged by 4 men.
Like, okay.
Game on.
I just walked through the desert, but okay. It's a test to see what level Selena is at, whether she's worthy or not. She's tired and she's hot and she's really thirsty, but this is Otterland's assassin, so of course she passes the test.
Scanning the other people in the room, her eyes stop on one of the most stunning people she's ever seen, a young woman with wine red hair and freckles flashing her a conspirator's grin. She's wearing armor, the right shoulder fashioned into a snarling wolf's head, and her helmet and pommel of her sword also feature a wolf.
And we talked about Ansel's description and armor in our Crescent City deep dive. She's described almost exactly like Bryce. Then there's also the wolf fit. The Prime called Bryce a wolf. We never really got an answer about that unless it was just like the heart of a wolf. And I really
felt it
thought
was heart of a
Danica,
wolf, but
yeah, I said that Danica goes inside of Bryce, so let's not talk about it. There could be something else, but like the door into another world, I think. I don't know if there's an actual connection between Ansel and Bryce, or there's only so many hair colors that Sarah can use, but it's fun to think about.
it is interesting how similar they do sound.
Especially the wine red hair.
Yeah, it's very specific red color.
Mm-hmm.
Ansel is also someone Selena indirectly talked about during Crown of Midnight.
Selena will be sharing a room with Ansel for the 1 month that she's there.
So there's 1 month, but there was the month getting here and the month back to Rifthold, so she'll be away a total of 3 months.
The Mute Master's like, cool, you're in, which she thought it was going to be so much harder. And he's just automatically like, okay, like you're sharing,
Sure.
There's your roommate. And it surprises Selena because Arabin made it seem like it would be nearly impossible to get him to train her. And as for the roommate thing, Selena doesn't have much experience with girls, like having friendships. Arabin really only invites courtesans over, and there aren't female assassins in the guild. But here, there are just as many women as there are men. So you're already seeing like the differences in how, well, we'll see a lot more, but how Arabin trains and treats his assassins versus the Mute Master.
That little nugget about how there's no other female assassins, I thought was super, super strange.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know why she's not, I mean, she's 16, but like, this is a red flag, Selena. Like, he knows who you are for real, for real.
Well,
and
and
you're
if
the
I were
only
gonna-
female he's taken on.
Right.
Why?
Well, and if I were going to have assassins, I would want female assassins because who else is going to be able to get into spaces with men being at their
They're
most
never
vulnerable?
suspected. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like Arabin is such a skis bag that usually he would turn those, any kind of like small female girls he finds, he would turn them over to the courtesans immediately.
Right.
So why would he choose to keep Selena? She was a pretty child, other than knowing who she really is.
Right.
I mean, maybe there's more to it, but I think that's very sus.
Yeah.
After seeing young acolytes, Ansel tells Selena she came to the Silent Assassins when she was 13.
She's now 18, so she's been here for 5 years and has yet to be trained by the Mute Master personally. There are actually several red flags about Ansel I didn't pick up on until I reread Assassin's Blade, and this is one of them. She's been there for 5 years, and the Mute Master has yet to really spend any time with her.
I would be in a full panic if I was Selena.
Mm-hmm.
But like once he does start to train me, I'd be like, what's wrong with Ansel?
Right.
That didn't take that long.
Well, and also it makes you wonder if he had given a shit about Ansel and maybe spent a little bit of time with her, could it have changed her path? Like, did he help build up that resentment, or was she always going to go down this path?
Yeah, I mean, she didn't earn the right to be trained, I guess, because, I mean, we'll get into this, but if she wasn't honest with him from the beginning, he's probably waiting for her to do that. But maybe it could have changed things. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say. Ansel is from the flatlands along the coast of the Western Wastes.
Formerly known as the Witch Kingdom, which is so metal. It just sounds so cool. The Witch Kingdom.
We did talk about it a little bit in Crown of Midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Ansel says that she was sent to the Silent Assassins by her father, the Lord of Briarcliff, who gifted her the sword with the wolf-shaped pommel because wolves are a family symbol.
And that is giving Starks.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the wolves. And it's also giving branding. Like the wolf fit is designed to help Ansel stick out, which again has not actually she hasn't gotten any time with the Mute Master.
I mean,
she also he doesn't really spend enough time on her, but then she doesn't seem to understand the Mute Master at all. Like that's not the kind of stuff he's looking for in a person.
Well, and I know that everybody's read it, so it's not like I'm giving spoilers. Like I don't want to say anything too soon, but at the same time, just as we watch Ansel, she's not really growing or evolving at all. So you've been there for 5 years and you don't seem to have picked up on who he is as a person.
Yeah.
You've had plenty of time around him and his people.
Mm-hmm.
Ansel straight up asks, how many people have you killed?
Oh my God, Karen, you can't just ask people how many people they've killed.
Also, it's enough that I'm not keeping track anymore. It's not a tally. But speaking of branding, Arabin usually sees to it that word gets out about Selena's kills because she doesn't sign her name at a crime scene or anything. Like,
That's
come
pretty
on.
gross. But yeah, that's how Ansel I mean, they all know Selena Sardot like, as soon as they hear the name, they're like, "Oh, this is Otterland's assassin."
Yeah.
And Ansel comments that she'd want everyone to know if she'd done it. Like, every murder she's ever done, she wants people to know.
Okay, serial killer. That's a red flag.
More red flags. Ansel asks Selena why she looks like Snooki after getting punched in the face, but she won't admit that Arabin did it. I can't tell if it's like shame or embarrassment, or she's trying to protect her murder daddy because it is kind of all she knows.
I don't know. Maybe it's just too much information to give away so soon.
Right.
Speaking of red flags, Selena's obviously very strong, but there are so many little moments when you can tell that she's a victim of abuse and definitely of grooming.
Absolutely. Like when people ask and she kind of there are even times where
She still feels
she's
protective of him. And I'm like, he
yeah,
literally
she's
just
like
beat the shit
proud
out
of
of
him at
you.
moments when people talk about how they would never like they would never send assassins into that area and she's like, "Yeah, because they don't want to fuck with me and my murder daddy." You know? It's just I don't know, it's very complicated.
Yes.
In the courtyard, Selena sees a book whose title is in a scrawling, strange script that she doesn't recognize. If she were alone, she would look through it, but she continues following Ansel to the baths. I'm assuming word marks for this book, right? A strange, flowy script in a book. I think
Um,
there was a little book of word marks. I mean, I guess it could
okay.
have also been like Sanskrit.
Literally any other language out
Yeah,
there.
but the way she has to have seen the language by
I mean,
now.
word marks are swirls and whirls.
Whirls and
So,
swirls. Thank you very much.
and excuse me, entirely possible that it's word marks.
Or I just everything I see, I'm like, is that a word mark? I'm like that meme of the guy with the butterfly. Like, is this a word mark?
I mean, but honestly, because Sarah leaves so many Easter eggs with the
Mhm.
word marks everywhere, you can't help but be like, is this one of those times?
Speaking of Sarah, I mean, we always speak of Sarah. That's all we do. But I saw a picture on Instagram, this bookstore, this romance bookstore that's opening up in Charleston, and Sarah stopped by. And they like posted a
Ooh,
picture with her. I was like, that is a celebrity sighting. Like,
that's a big deal.
just being around Nashville, we see country artists a lot. Who gives a shit? But if I saw Sarah, I would simply pass away. Like, I don't know what I would, I don't know
Simply
if I
pass
would
away.
be too scared to go up and talk to her, or I'd like shake her and be like, "Who's Asriel's mate?
Just can you
Just
just
tell me.
blink once if that's okay? We're on the same
Keep
page.
breathing if it's Gwen."
Oh, Sarah, that'd be so fun. Selena's tings are in her and Ansel's room, which sounds a lot like dorm
Can
rooms.
you imagine sharing a dorm room with someone who has a human-sized dummy for their armor?
As soon as she was like, "Oh, it's for her armor," I'd been like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Like, that's not where my mind
You're
went.
like, there are so many. That's why I kind of like Ansel. Is she's crazy, but she's kind of funny.
Like,
Like
it's
she's just
totally
like the
different.
crazy friend that everyone had in
It's
college.
definitely something out there. Selena peeks through Ansel's drawers and finds folded undergarments.
Maybe the biggest red flag of them all.
Definitely a
Who is
serial killer.
folding their underwear?
But then that makes her think of Sam.
Because she bets that Sam folds his panties. You know, if he's alive. Arabin would never permanently scar Selena, but Sam isn't the heir, he's the spare. Meaning to Arabin, Sam is expendable.
Yikes. Selena dreams of that night in Rifthold. Arabin, the most angry she's ever seen him. He directs his rage at Selena, but Sam speaks up, saying it's not her fault.
And you know that didn't help. Like, you appreciate what he's doing, but Sam,
But also don't show any it's
don't show
showing an
interest.
yeah, you're showing an interest in my possession and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Arabin
Yeah,
knows
that's right. You're showing in like he sees Selena as his possession.
he will fight you for his
Right.
things, so you need to not let him know, I guess, how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
Arabin knows the only reason that Sam became involved was because that she decided to free the slaves.
He orders his bodyguard Wesley to get 3 other assassins, Turn, Mullen, and Harding.
Selena first thinks they're going to beat Sam, but
Because
Arabin,
she's like, no, don't do it. And then it really turns.
I know. I mean, he literally just told, he's made it very clear that he doesn't think Sam is the one to blame. So I don't know why she's like, leave Sam alone. I'm like, I don't think it's going that way. But Arabin turns to her and says, you are not going to enjoy this. You will not forget this. And I don't want you to. Before 3 full grown men start beating the shit out of a 16-year-old girl.
Fuck?
Wait, I thought the men were holding Sam back.
Yeah, Yeah, you're right. The 3 men are holding Sam, and he's beating the shit out of her.
Okay, sorry. So refresh. The men are holding Sam back, who is thrashing and like losing his mind, but Arabin is beating the shit out of, like, he's punching her in the face,
Mhm.
and he's very, like, focused, like, he knows he's not in a rage where he's out of control. He is very intentionally being this brutal.
Right.
I'm kind of, like, surprised that she's surprised because
Mhm.
he has been so brutal to her so many other times, but again, it's that grooming.
Well, it's the cycle of abuse where and we see it when she goes back to Rifthold, he'll be like, "Here are some pretty tings," and, like, he gives her gifts, and then he's really nice to her, and then he beats the shit out of her, or he,
Well,
like
he'll
it
inflate
comes
her
in waves.
he'll inflate her ego about how
Right.
important she is and how great she is, and that's why she prances around like, "I'm the best. Why would I need
Mhm.
further training?" You know,
But
but
then he
then
puts her in her place so that she doesn't leave him.
he also makes her think it's for her own good a lot of the times
Right.
with the punishments. Although at this point, like, although I've wronged you, there's no way that I can somehow be led to, like, gaslighted into believing this is for my own good.
Right.
She knows that Sam is screaming during this, but she can't hear or she can't really process his words.
Or she isn't ready to process them yet. And this moment sticks with Selena for a very long time, the moment with Arabin and Sam. Even in Air of Fire, which I'm reading now to outline, when she's being beat up by a certain someone, she thinks this is bad, but not as bad as the time that Arabin beat the shit out of me. Like, it sticks with her.
Because Arabin is genuinely just beating her. It's
Mhm.
not
And
training in
she's
any
not fighting
fashion.
back, which is goes against everything we know about her, which again shows
Well, like
like
she
how
it's like she knows it's a punishment, so she's allowing it to
you're
happen.
right.
But I mean, again, when there's 4 or 5 grown men in that room, like,
Yeah, it's
how can I
disgusting.
fight back and, like, win this?
Mhm.
Ugh. Selena dresses in her nicest tunic and even puts on some eye makeup before heading to dinner in a hall packed with tables and benches full of people.
She follows Ansel to a table, and it's very like new girl at school. She's like, "This is Selena. Selena, this is everybody." And Ansel eats first to prove that the food isn't poisoned and comments that Lord Barrick might want to kill us, but he knows better than to use poison.
She explains that Lord Barrick is the local villain, or I guess they're his villains, depending on who's telling the story.
A curly-haired, dark-eyed man named Mikhail, is that how you say that?
I would say Mikhail.
Mikhail corrects Barrick is the villain, and Selena notes he has a smile like Rolf's. And I don't know, I highlighted that in my reread because I was like, is that like a little red flag? Just a little,
He's a little smarmy. Like, what does that
yeah.
mean? A
Because
little
when we
arrogant?
learn more about Mikhail, yeah, it's not good.
Lord Barrick rules over the city of Xandria and claims that he also rules over the part of the desert where the silent assassins live. The king of Otterland set an embargo on the Red Desert after Lord Barrick failed to send troops into Eelway to crush rebellion, and Barrick has been dying to get back in the king's good graces ever since.
So too long didn't read. Lord Barrick is convinced that killing the assassins and sending the head of the Mute Master to the King of Alderland will get him back into the group chat.
So Barrick has been running through the cartoon playbook, sending snakes in baskets, sending soldiers dressed as foreign dignitaries, sending troops in the middle of the night with fire-tipped arrows, trying to dig a tunnel under their wall.
And Sarah loves saying asp instead of snake because it wasn't an asp shifters that Danica and Bryce, like
Yes.
whatever happened in the desert.
And I was like, wasp?
Yeah,
What
we
an
thought
idiot.
they were wasps. Sarah, just say snakes, please.
Not all of us know these things. Okay. It's so embarrassing.
I remember us talking about wasps driving motorcycles.
I was like, what is wrong? I mean, not that snakes could drive motorcycles either, but like, what the fuck?
But imagine you're facing someone and they're like, I'm going to shift. And they shift. And it's just
You're
a
like,
wasp.
I don't know. I have a problem. You know what? I've learned something, okay?
We're learning
I
so
learned
much.
something from these books. Even though they get shushed, they continue the convo, and Ansel makes the comment, "That's the problem with attacking an impenetrable fortress full of skilled warriors. You have to be smarter than us."
Mm-hmm.
Mikhail says Ansel knows Barrick's cruelty firsthand because the master occasionally sends her to Xandria to meet with him to try to negotiate peace.
And I do wonder, like, why did the master start sending someone that he did not trust? Because we learn he's known since the beginning she was lying. Was he testing her? Like, the master plays too much with his lessons,
Well,
and a lot of
also,
people die because of it.
if they're still getting attacked at least once a month, then it's not working.
Yeah,
So
is
why
it
are we still
working? He
using
just
her?
sent a bunch of snakes in baskets.
Like, it doesn't make sense. Seeing Ansel didn't die after eating the food, Selena finally takes a few bites of food and looks down the table at people from a mix of different kingdoms and continents. Some talking quietly, others communicating through what sounds like sign language.
Yeah, the way she describes it sounds like a more basic form of sign language.
Hmm.
And not only are there people from everywhere, but they're trained killers from everywhere, and it's still peaceful. Otterlin they could never do this. Like the way that I guess it's Arobin, but also just the kingdom itself.
I don't
Everyone is
know.
so territorial and aggressive.
Arabin has really fostered that like cutthroat,
Mhm.
like mindset amongst their own people, all the
Like,
other assassins.
and that's why she's shocked looking around because they're all just like eating together, laughing together, like silently or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, so we kill, whatever. We're friends. There are foreign dignitaries in the corner whisper fighting about which assassins they're going to bid for. Foreign courts come to offer positions to assassins, sometimes for a mission, sometimes for a lifelong contract. Anyone is free to go, but it's not forced.
Right, like, they aren't being contracted through the Mute Master the way that people contract assassins in the guild through Arabin, where he's, like, taking a huge piece of it,
Mhm.
and you don't have a choice. But none of the courts that bid on the silent assassins are in Otterlin's grasp.
So calm down. We're not stepping on Arabin's toes.
Mhm.
There's a weird moment of almost pride at knowing these assassins wouldn't dare encroach on Arabin's
Right.
territory. I mean, it's just that I hate saying grooming over and over again, but like it is. It's
Mhm.
that trust and belief in Arabin.
Well, and this is so out of pocket to make this comparison, but I've been watching the Menendez brothers,
Yeah.
and Arabin kinda reminds me of the father,
Yeah.
of just how competitive he was and abusive and aggressive, and but also the way that he, like, weaponized his love where they craved it so much.
Yeah. And they fought really hard to like,
Yeah.
are you talking about like the one that the Menendez brothers actually put out
Yeah,
versus
I'm
the other
watching the
one?
documentary. I haven't
Okay.
watched the dramatized.
Well, because I think the dramatized is probably still similar because you get multiple perspectives when you're
Mhm.
watching it. But there's a clip in the dramatized version of the Menendez brothers where Lyle is like, he'd be so fucking proud of us. Even though they
Yeah.
killed him, they're like, he'd be so proud of us. Like, it's still that, like,
They still
it's
wanted to
ingrained in them.
protect him after, it seemed like. So, yeah, it's very complicated.
Yeah. I mean, when Selena asks if Ansel wants to leave, she says no. Her father would wallop her if she bound herself to a foreign court.
She says wallop a lot, and I do not like that word. It's
Wallop.
fucking silly. Knowing the fate of her family, I can't tell though if Ansel is really sad or is she just psychotic. Like the way that Ansel talks about her family, she's a very interesting character.
I mean, she's had to keep up a facade for so long and she can't be seen grieving. So I wonder if she's like Selena in that she's pushed the truth way down.
Mhm.
Like what's happened to her, she's pushed it so far down so that it doesn't like she
Yeah,
doesn't think about it often. And then the family she's thinking of now when she makes these comments, like it's her family, but it's not. It's like a
right.
whatever she's built for
She's a
herself.
little Delulu.
Yeah. Back to Mikhail, Selena catches a vibe between he and Ansel.
And between her and some dark haired, handsome young man watching her from a few seats away, which I
Heyo.
forgot you brought up. We do see him later.
Yeah.
And we're not totally sure how to say his name.
Um, yes. So I think Elias is what we'll go with.
Elias or Elias.
Is it because I've seen Elias spelled with an E
Mhm.
and it could be
Elias.
Elias.
We YouTubed it, but then I don't know if that guy is a Sarah J. Maas fan.
That was also
Whoever was
unclear. Well,
reading
they
it on
said it with a
YouTube.
Greek accent. So then I asked, I don't know. Okay. I will probably end up saying Ilias.
Your sister will roast us regardless.
She can't help herself. By the way, if anybody was listening, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before with Mab or Mabe. We looked it up. We're talking about like
The
the
goddess.
3 Fae queens that are
Oh,
like
yeah.
Maeve, Mora, and Mab or Mabe. It's Mob.
Mob. Which
So,
does not.
both of us were wrong. We were trying to say, I think Kate said Mabe, I said Mab,
We were both wrong.
and then it's Mob.
But
We know, guys. We're aware of our
Elias
mistakes.
is silent like his father.
Yes, and very handsome. As she's
Very
describing him, I
handsome.
was like, why are we not having a little affair here?
I know.
You're not tied down.
We know my ongoing list of everyone. Like, all of the silent assassins would have gotten it
This
already.
one's like, I mean, good grief later. Like, this one sounds worth a kiss. Like, hello.
I know. Well, he's very sweet. Like, he's very respectful.
He's watching out for her.
Right.
You know, maybe it's time to download Duolingo sign language.
Yeah. She's looking at him and she's like, he's as desirable as Sam.
Girl, who said anything about
Everything
Sam?
with her comes back to Sam. The diva is Elias, the master's son, but Ansel says he's usually too focused on training and meditating to notice anyone, even pretty girls.
I'd be like, thank you so much. Also, someone's Jelly Jubilee.
There are several moments where, I mean, like, I think Ansel and Selena were friends, but they're more frenemies they are competitive. And there are several moments where Ansel's like, oh, wow, Selena Sardathian. She's a little bit jealous.
I mean, she's definitely a little jealous, but I don't think that she's like full frenemy. Like, she doesn't take it out on Selena.
Right.
But she does voice it.
Which is kind of like, I mean, Selena needs humbled every once in a while. It's kind of funny.
Yep.
And when Ansel says, you must have a stacked roster at home, Selena's mind drifts to the guys that she has crushed on, like Archer and Ben, which again, like, I like reading this after Crown of Midnight because it is a reminder of that history that Selena and Archer had and like why that was so hard for her.
Yeah, there was so much more to having to kill Archer.
And then why it was like, I know Ben ended up being more of like a father figure, but why it was so crushing and like a pivotal moment for her losing him.
Yeah. And then Ansel asks about her busted face, and she says, if you ask my murder daddy, I deserved it. But if you ask the 200 slaves that I freed, I didn't.
And that's a mic drop because everyone's like, skirt. What?
And it sounds almost like she's bragging, but then you realize like she's genuinely like just angry of the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
Training starts with a 3-mile run to the next oasis the next morning while holding 2 wooden buckets.
That sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Okay, like, first of all, Nashville is very hilly, so trying to run around here is miserable. And you want to add sand that like is unstable, I would die.
Well, and I can picture it because it's very like classic training montage.
Yeah, it's
of
very like
it's
Mulan.
Very Mulan. Yes, I'll make a man. Okay,
there it is.
So that's what they're making a man out of you. Selena has a tight deadline to train with the master, and she has to get that letter of approval. So she's stressed, but it doesn't matter how much you demand or beg to train with the master. He decides when you're ready. So she can't. There's nothing really she can do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least make it seem like you're in it for more than just the letter of approval.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we all don't have our own secret agenda, says Ansel.
It's another red flag. I'd be like, excuse me?
She's got a long list going. Selena makes it 1 mile before she has to slow to a walk. And I mean, honestly, that's impressive.
That's good.
But
on sand, have you ever not even packed?
No,
sand,
I can't
like
even walk
ocean.
on the beach. Like, can you? People that run on the beach, you guys are tough.
Like,
and
what
then this
shoes
is like
are they wearing?
Full dunes. Yeah, good question. I mean, her swagger is disappearing real fast.
It's like when she first got to the glass castle and had to go on that run. But she's also very hard on herself. Excuse me.
Well, I mean, I guess if she's quote been the best or been told she's the best or like she's just really in her head about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's honestly probably good for her to be humbled every once in a while.
Right. You can't always be the best at everything you do the first time. But also, I would be so sunburned. The way they describe everyone, like Ansel and everyone having lighter skin, I'm like, what are you?
You know they don't have sunscreen.
No.
Like, also, Selena would be so sunburned because I feel like they described her as being very, very light, like fair-skinned.
Mm-hmm.
That just sounds miserable. Then you have sun poisoning. But like, okay. She finally reaches this small oasis, then basically takes until dinner to make it back.
Jesus.
A literal whole day of running in the desert.
She's staring at the master, waiting for him to stand during dinner so she can casually run into him. And she catches Mikhail and Ansel holding hands under the table. And you're like, is that romantic? It's not.
Okay.
When you're first reading, you're like, oh, it's kind of cute. But then when you learn the backstory of how they got together, it's actually pretty gross.
Is it?
She was 13.
Oh, well, that's gross.
And he was in his 20s. So
I was like, I mean,
pretty gross.
They still have a bit of a bond, but that part's definitely gross. Also, I love that she's going to like try to catch the master. Like, he has no idea what you're planning. Like, this guy knows.
Yeah.
You're new here. You're clearly very eager. He knows what you're doing.
One of my favorite parts of this story is her trying to talk to him, and she doesn't want to use words. So she's trying to mime stuff out. And, he's like,
but you know what? He does understand what she's saying, which is, I mean, they're having a moment. She runs up on the master, who has a pale line around one of his fingers, perhaps where a wedding band had once been.
Put a pin in that.
She isn't sure what to say or if she should say anything, so she just smiles at him and starts miming,
She's like,
running
running.
and shaking her head and frowning and trying to communicate that she came here to train with him, not some, me and you.
Me and you, me
And be
and
like,
you.
what are you insinuating? Like, calm down.
You trying to fuck?
I mean, a lot of this me and you happening.
The master shakes his head and seems to be telling her to slow down, which is so anti-Selena. She looks confused. She's like, shrug? AKA, how long are you going to make me wait? And he hits her with another shrug and walks off.
I would be like, okay. And of course, Ansel doesn't make her feel better. She's like, I've been here for 5 years. So I'd be like, I'm effed.
I have a month.
She starts to go after him when her arm is grabbed by Ilias, who shakes his head like, stop harassing my father, please.
Defeated, she returns to her room and stares at the ceiling, homesick and wishing Sam were there. I mean, she thinks about Sam so much.
She's thinking about, like, when did we take this turn?
But then she's also 16, and like, I was a very obsessive 16-year-old.
Oh my God, I was also very focused on boys. So if you were cute, I don't know how she hadn't been thinking about Sam sooner. Because
I would have been thinking about Sam. I would have been thinking about a lot of people.
I would have been paying very close attention to all of them. She's a homesick cockblock because her being in there is keeping Mikhail away from Ansel's room.
And Ansel, this is what I was talking about. Ansel says she's been seeing Mikhail since she was 15. Sorry, not 13, 15. Still very gross. And he was in his mid-20s. So a 15-year-old dating mid-20s.
Like, ugh.
Even Selena, whose life has been totally fucked since she was like 8, is thinking, that's gross. Like, that's wrong. And it makes me, it's gross. And it also makes me feel better about what happens to him. I remember the first time I read, I was like, oh no, Mikhail. But you know what? Fuck that guy.
It is gross, but I'm surprised that they wrote about Selena thinking about it because, like, in Rifthold, I don't know how old the prostitutes are when they sell their virginity, but they sell their virginity at like 17.
Mm-hmm.
People are getting married really young. So, like, I don't know. It's gross, but I feel like nobody else is thinking it's that gross. So for them to point it out for Selena, I was like, where did that come from?
And Ansel she talks about, where I'm from, people get married at 13. That's why I remembered 13.
I mean, in real life, people used to get married that young too, which is so gross.
I can't even, I'm in my 30s and I would be a child bride. I would consider myself a child bride.
Absolutely. But back to thinking about Sam, Selena doesn't know when she got so attached to him or what he'd been shouting while Arabin beat her, why he'd needed 3 assassins to restrain him that day.
And we're getting little crumbs of what happened. And when she first thinks about it, you assume that Arabin called the assassins to beat her or restrain her, but they were restraining Sam. But you don't know that at first because the way she talks about it in the first 2 stories, you don't actually know what happened.
Yeah, we don't get we know that she was beaten, but we don't know the full details.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, Selena runs a little farther, then even farther the day after that, but she still isn't sent for by the master, so she starts attending drills with Ansel.
Elias starts attending too, but total coincidence.
Totally. The silent assassins aren't known for any skill in particular, just the way that they move.
But I'd say the biggest difference is actually the vibes, where Arabin took the more Abby Lee Miller cutthroat approach. The assassins here learn from each other. Like, yeah, they're competitive, but there's also a bond. And on her 5th night there, the fortress is attacked by 30 of Lord Barrick's soldiers. Interestingly, it's on a night when many of the assassins are away, escorting foreign dignitaries to the nearest port.
Elias gives the signal, and Selena, Ansel, and the other assassins lined up on the wall light the tips of their arrows and fire, but not at the men. At a ridge in the sand just below the soldiers that Mikhail and Ilias soaked in oil, creating a wall of fire that stretches around the whole fortress.
I have questions about the timeline of when Ansel and Lord Barrick started plotting together, because why is he doing these little cartoonish attacks? Like, he knew that 30 soldiers were not going to be able to take on the silent assassins. Like, what was this?
Yeah, they're also not, the assassins are not going to kill the soldiers. So, like, it seems silly for both of them. Like, what was the point? Why are we both doing this?
Right.
But also, is it just so that, like, there's an excuse for Ansel to come meet with him again? Because she goes out right after.
Maybe.
So I guess instead of like passing messages, she's required to go. I don't know.
That's a good point.
Ansel is oh wait, just kidding.
Back in her room, Mikhail gives a sealed scroll to Ansel to deliver to Xandria. So if that was a plan, it worked. She asks Selena to join her, and she agrees even though it's a 2 days journey because, like, what else is she gonna do?
Ansel is very manipulative. She's
She's
like,
very manipulative.
I mean, I feel like Selena was also probably already considering it, but Ansel is very much like, I bet it would really impress the master if you came with me.
They spend the next day traveling across the sand, only stopping at midday to sleep under their cloaks to avoid the sun at its highest. That sounds fucking miserable.
I would be roasted. Like,
I
I
would be
mean,
so sunburned.
that's so much. I mean, I'm sure they're wearing some kind of like light cloaks to cover themselves, but still.
Still.
Ansel talks about her home, which used to be part of the Witch Kingdom.
And there's a lore dump, mostly info that we got in Crown of Midnight, because this is the friend that Selena references learning about the Iron Teeth witches from. The friend that she says betrayed her. So if you started out, if you like followed the Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Assassin's Blade, you already know that this betrayal is coming.
Yes. And so, of course, as I was reading, I was like, how? What?
Mm-hmm.
Waiting for us to get to it. When the Kraken queens ruled 500 years ago, the Witch Kingdom was beautiful. But then the three Iron Teeth clans destroyed it when they overthrew the Kraken dynasty. When Selena asks about the Iron Teeth, Ansel explains that while some witches like the Krakens were gifted with ethereal beauty, the Iron Teeth have iron teeth and nails.
I'd be so fucking mad.
And ethereal beauty.
I would be resentful.
They are like terrifying, but they're also still beautiful.
Right.
Come on.
When the Iron Teeth clans destroyed the kingdom, the last Kraken queen cast a spell that turned the land against any that flew under the banner of the Iron Teeth, so that no crops would grow, the animals died, and the water turned muddy.
Ansel says it's not like that now, though. The lands have been fertile ever since the Iron Teeth journeyed east toward Otterland.
And is it like anywhere they go, the land turns, or is it just that the Witch Kingdom?
I think it's very specific to the Witch Kingdom.
Okay, I can't remember. It's been so many years since I read.
Yeah, they were fighting to get that specific kingdom, and then as a last fuck you, it was basically kept out of their grasp.
Okay.
Selena asks if Ansel has ever seen a witch, and she has. When she was 8 and her sister was 11, they and a friend named Maddie snuck out of Briarcliff Hall. A few miles away, there was a giant watchtower in ruins at the top thanks to the witch wars, but the rest is intact.
At the bottom of the watchtower is an archway. When a stable boy told Ansel's sister you could look through to another world on the night of the summer solstice. So they look through and they see Feyre drunk on fairy wine and Tamlin playing the fiddle. Just kidding. But knowing about the Massverse, which again, Massverse spoilers ahead, and what happens in Kingdom of Ash and House of Sky and Breath and Flame and Shadow, this is such a little crazy Easter egg. Like, do we think that this archway is a thin place, a word gate, or I mean, it could be the stable boy was just fucking with them and it's just a story. But, you know, we talked about this isn't the southern continent, but do we actually know the specifics of how and where the Fae from presumably the southern continent of Aurelia that go missing, where they crossed over into Midgard? Like, could this have been used to cross over into other worlds?
I have two potential thoughts. Like, one, like you're right, could this be how the witches traveled into other worlds?
Mm-hmm.
But two, they briefly discussed witch mirrors in Crown of Midnight, and we'll hear about them again. I can't help but wonder if it wasn't like an actual just portal or a thin place. Was there a witch mirror that was there?
Yeah.
That because the witch mirrors potentially can be used to travel from one place to another.
Well, and the fact that she encounters a witch here, it just makes you wonder, were witches going through to other worlds and maybe even staying there? Like maybe some of the characters that we've met could be witches from Aurelia.
Yeah. And I mean, and this had to have been before magic was gone too. So like there is no telling what could have been happening.
Right. Is that why the gate now you can't go through it? It's because magic disappeared?
I would assume.
But if it were a word gate, that exists outside.
Yeah, but if it was a thin place.
But if it were a mirror.
Or a mirror, it may not have worked. I don't know. But
it's
like
very interesting.
Yeah, I want to know more about it, which I don't know if we get more information on it. Back to Ansel and Selena. Ansel tells her she didn't go inside the watchtower, but hid behind a rock while her sister and Maddie did. Her sister came running out and said they went under the archway and saw an old woman with metal teeth who grabbed Maddie and dragged her into the stairwell. When she tells her father what happened, they run back to the tower to tell her father what happened, and there's no trace of Maddie or the old woman, just bones picked clean.
And we know an Iron Teeth bitch who loves to pick bones clean. Like that was very, like,
I don't know if we
intentionally mentioned
it sounds
with
just like
Baba.
Baba Yellowlegs.
Right.
Yeah, like she was sitting there eating those chicken bones and
Yes,
being
it was just
nasty.
for that to have been mentioned seems important,
It all
right?
yeah, it definitely all seems like it could have been Baba.
Hmm.
She then shares a bit of lore that comes in very helpful in Crown of Midnight. The only way to kill a witch is to cut off her head.
Ansel also makes a comment that if she had her own army, even if she had 20 silent assassins, she would hunt down all of the witches, which is genocide. And she talks about she's resentful, obviously, towards the assassins because they've been here for how long and they've never participated in genocide. She's like, they never even, there's never war. They never, because they are very, the silent assassins seem neutral.
Mhm.
They're not going to just join a side. And she resents them, I guess, for not helping her and her family. Is
I
that the
would
read?
I would take it that way, or just like not step with all the things that are happening, they haven't stepped up to protect those that are unprotected in
Well,
any
and that is
way.
kind of should they have? Like, should they be
Well, and that's
helping
what's
more?
kind of difficult because they are a combination of so many different countries. Like they don't have
They're not like a unified,
well, they don't have any loyalty to any specific country. So like
right?
if you're going to step in to help, where do you even start?
Well, I guess that's why when we see them later on, it's so important because that's
Yeah.
not their history.
Yeah, there's no yeah, it's outside of the realm of what they would normally do.
And Ansel says that if she were the master, she would use their numbers for glory and defend every unprotected realm out there.
I mean,
Which, okay.
that's a red flag. One, yes, to protect the unprotected, fine, but you
But
just said glory
glory,
first.
right.
Okay, is it for glory or to help those in need? Like
No
which one,
one wearing
Ansel?
full body armor in the desert is doing anything other than glory.
I mean, so Ansel resents not being trained by the master and the assassin's perceived apathy.
And it's just 5 years of building resentment and rage and anger inside of her.
So that's where we'll pause and pick up with part 2, which is still being released today.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, it's already posted.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, y'all.